Hi, everyone. Sorry about the late start for today's briefing. We are in war and things of emergency natures come up and unfortunately delay us a little bit, but we are here and we're going to do our best with the time, of course, that we have. Of course, many of you know, but it's always good to review that this webinar, this briefing is brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is a Bitronistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security-oriented policies to guide the state of Israel. We are a movement of more than 20,000 people, including many, many reserve officers and operators from all branches of the Israel Defense Establishment. And of course, during this time of war, many of our officers are activated and heavily engaged in this war. Hence, sometimes the late starts and the lack of coordination that we can always have. We're going to begin with my good friend Danny Seaman, who's going to provide a bit of an update while we're still waiting for General Amir Avivi to join the call. Danny, please.
Well, since I passed the age of military service, I'm a bit more available, albeit last minute. I'm trying to think of if Amir gets on, I don't want to touch on the military things. We can maybe I'll touch a little on the political aspects and things that you see in the media. Blinken is here, the American Secretary of State. There's a lot going on in the media, a lot of reports coming out. I think that people have to realize that what you hear in the media is not always what's happening on the ground. Obviously, the Americans have their positions and their ideas of what they want, but they are listening to what Israel has to say, and the government of Israel is considerate of the United States, but at the same time, they're doing what the Israeli public want them to do. We may elaborate on that a little more, but I see that we have Amir on board here, so I think it's more important to get the military update, so I'll step aside and let Amir do his thing.
Thank you very much, Danny. Hello, everybody. I want to talk a bit about, I visited the Gaza Strip yesterday, and I looked at really what's going on with all the forces all around. At the moment, there are, I don't want to say the exact number, but more than 10 brigades that are operating inside Gaza. Most of them are attacking in Khan Yunis, and when I looked at in the war room at the digital map, you can see they are everywhere, all around, inside, closing on the leadership of Hamas, and looking for the hostages. So I think that things in this sense are proceeding well in this area. At the same time, we have brigades that are attacking the central camps in Gaza. Every day they find rocket launchers, they destroy terrorists and infrastructure. In the north part of Gaza, in the city of Gaza, we are all the time destroying tunnels, and still there are terrorists, but overall the area is under control. We had a very sad incident. We had combat engineers that were preparing a tunnel for explosion. There was a tank that was securing them, and he saw some terrorists and shot. And for some reason, this shooting detonated the explosives in the tunnel while our forces were inside the tunnel, and 6 soldiers were killed. A very, very sad and would say bad incident. But this is part of the dealing with wars. This is what we are dealing with. I talked to many of the commanders that are operating. I can say that the morale is really, really high. They feel that they are successful in the combat, and as they are moving forward, that they managed to really kill many terrorists. We are getting used more and more to dealing with the underground infrastructure and even fighting inside the tunnels. This is something that was new in a way to many of our soldiers, but they are developing techniques all the time and getting better and better at doing that. In the north, what we see is basically the IDF destroying Hezbollah positions from the border all the way 7 kilometers inside Lebanon. Most of the Hezbollah forces withdrew from this area north, and we destroyed some of their commanders, very high-ranking commanders in Hezbollah. At the same time, Hezbollah is continuing to shoot. They managed to hit one of our alert bases in Meron Mountain, but didn't do too much damage. And the IDF is continuing to operate. Overall, we are now releasing some of the reserve units. There are reservists who have been in fighting 90 days. They need to go home. They need to go to their jobs and families. And they know that probably in a month or 2 or 3, they will be called again for service in order to continue the operations. So we are talking about a long war. This is the reality, but it's moving forward, and every day we see Hamas really losing more and more capabilities. I must say that from, I would say, American point of view, and Danny maybe elaborated about that a bit. On one hand, we see the administration assisting with munitions and things we need. On the other hand, they are making our life very difficult by insisting to bring to Gaza a lot of logistics and fuel and food, and this is all going to Hamas, unfortunately. And this is endangering our soldiers, and they're also trying to coerce us to move Gazans north, which is also bad for us and endangers our soldiers. America is very involved in every single thing we do in Gaza. And there's a challenge to the Prime Minister, to the Minister of Defense, how to stick to the goals of war and try to maneuver with all these demands that are coming from the administration. The administration, I think, is looking mostly on the elections. They want this war overdone. They don't want to fight. They want to quiet. They want to deal with the elections, but life is not like that. There is a war. It's not going anywhere. We're not going to give up our goals of war to destroy Hamas. So you hear Israeli leadership saying, yes, we're changing techniques. We're going to do things a bit differently and so on. A lot of it is to appease the administration. Some of it, they cannot just only talk. They need to do some things also. But I'm hopeful that we'll continue step by step until we'll see Hamas destroyed as a governmental and a military entity, and also, of course, reaching to hostages. On the 25th of January, we're doing a big convention, bringing many of the brigade and battalion commanders in reserve that have fought in this war, people from all the municipalities around Gaza and the north, politicians, diplomats, and so on. And we're going to discuss in depth the war itself, the strategy. We're going to talk about the day after. We're going to talk about how to deal with all the different fronts we have: Iran, Houthis in Yemen, Iraq, Syria, Hezbollah, and so on. And we're going to talk about the society and what's going on, looking to the war and the day after. I can say that from IDSF point of view, there is many people who are joining the organization. We get many requests for briefings and meetings and events around Israel. People really want to know what's going on. And of course, we are very busy on media and the social media, trying to really strengthen the society, explain things, and of course, assist the government in understanding what's the right thing to do. Moshe, I'd happy to answer questions. So please.
Yes, thank you, General. So first of all, thank you to all of our viewers who submitted questions. We get countless questions, and I try as much as I can to cover them, to reach them. So if we don't get to your question today, stay tuned, keep coming to our briefings, and we'll discuss all of these issues. So General, the other day we had Maurice Hirsch on the briefing, and he expressed his disappointment about the lack of international support, meaning when you look beyond the US, there's so much the international community could have done when seeing the horrors of what Hamas did in Israel, and they just failed to do so. I'm wondering if you share that sentiment with Maurice in terms of the lack of international support, and also on the ground in terms of operations of the IDF. Are there limitations? Is the IDF being affected by the lack of international support?
So I think that usually when you see lack of support, it comes usually from international entities, like let's say European Union, UN, organizations like that. But when you talk about bilateral relations, we have many good friends who support us and see a lot of things we do eye to eye. So I myself am a big believer on bilateral relations and not all these international organizations. Once you bring too many countries together, always it's very hard to see a very clear policy. At the end of the day, on a practical level, really the only country that matters is the US. And I must say that, as I said, there are two ways to look at it. On one hand, yes, we're getting support and munitions and so on. On the other hand, I think that the world view is really wrong. The thinking that we can go to a two-state solution, the lack of understanding what war is and what is needed to win a war, and imposing on us different limitations, it's a problem. On the ground, we're not taking any risk with our soldiers. Everywhere we fight fiercely, and they give the soldiers everything they need to achieve their missions. And this will continue until we destroy Hamas.
Is there a concern of an increase in activity in Judea and Samaria right now?
So we've seen in the last week an increase in terror attacks in Judea and Samaria. The army is still operating and apprehending terrorists every day in the different cities, but they managed to carry out some attacks, even killing Israeli Arabs in the area of Binyamin. I cannot say that there is something dramatic or a huge change in the situation, but definitely when we go in, we still see a lot of terror. We saw it in Jenin. with an improvised explosive device that was exploded under a border patrol vehicle, killing one of our soldiers. So there are capabilities, and we need to continue operating every day to foil these attacks.
And we spoke in the past about the vulnerabilities on the Jordan border. Does that continue to be an issue? Threats coming in from Jordan or potentially?
So I think the rhetorics in Jordan are terrible. And there is a lot of support for Hamas, and we see it in the Jordanian parliament. We might face local terror attacks. We haven't seen one yet, but there is readiness also along the Jordan Valley. Overall, the coordination with the Jordanian army is good, but definitely we have to keep our eyes open and follow what's going on in this border.
And then in terms of Hezbollah in the north, is there this anticipation that they're just planning attacks right now? They're planning a big attack, or is Israel very much on the offensive and we're not worried about them infiltrating Israel?
Again, Moshe, sorry?
Hezbollah, can you give a little more detail on what is happening with Hezbollah? Are we purely on the offensive?
Yeah. So I think that we have to be very alert. It's not really clear exactly what their intentions are. Some people say, yes, they are deterred, they don't want war. I'm not sure that this is the case. They're shooting and shooting a lot. And we are shooting also. But eventually, I think that what will define what will happen is us. And we cannot live with Hezbollah on our borders. We need Hezbollah out. And it's going to happen either in a military way with a full-scale war against Hezbollah, or the ability to pass resolution, to really get Hezbollah to adhere to Resolution 1701. In order to do so, we need American leadership. Being willing to pose a military threat is going to be very, very hard to avoid war in Lebanon.
Yes, there were some concerns that Israel was lacking heavy munitions. Is that still an issue right now?
You never have enough. We always need more. And it's a struggle. It's an everyday struggle to really produce or get all the munitions we need. And to a certain extent, it's of course also affecting decisions when it comes to how to operate and where to operate and so on.
Okay, again, thank you so much to everyone who is sending in all of the questions. Is there any movement with Egypt and potentially figuring out an alternative for the Gazan population to stay in Gaza, or potentially open up ways for them to exit, move to Egypt or other countries?
Egypt is closing the border. They're not letting people out. And this is terrible because many, many Gazans want to emigrate, want to leave Gaza. Nobody is forcing them. They simply really want to leave. And I don't see enough pressure, not from Israel, not from the US, not from European Union, on the Egyptians to actually want to leave Gaza, leave the place. I hope that there will be a moment where the Egyptians will have no choice but open the border, and then I think we'll see a lot of people migrating from Gaza to other places.
Okay, thank you. We'll go a few minutes over today if we have the time, since we started late, General, but you'll let me know when you have to get off the call. There's a report in the news today that Hamas has effectively lost control of Gaza. Do you agree with that statement?
And Hamas has lost control of mostly the northern part of Gaza, not of all of Gaza. It's still in control. But as we are closing on the leadership of Hamas, maybe in coming weeks we'll see a very big change in their ability to really control.
Is there a certain point in time where Hamas runs out of bullets? Is that a feasible possibility and then the war ends, or do they just have such a stockpile that will never happen?
The only way this can happen is if we control the Egyptian border, and we're not controlling it. We haven't decided to conquer Rafah yet, and in order to really close the border and create a siege on Gaza and fully control anything that's going in, until this happens, Hamas will be able to continue to equip itself with munitions that are coming from Iran, from China, and from other places. This is the reality we're facing at the moment.
Okay,
May I just add to that? I'd just like to add to that something that people may not be aware of. The ammunitions coming from Egypt to the Gaza Strip are coming from the Sinai. The Sinai is about 3 times the size of the entire state of Israel. And the Egyptians don't really have control over that. We know that ISIS was embedded there for a while, and there's still these organizations that have for years now been smuggling weapons to the Hamas. They're still operating. Egypt hasn't done anything to stop them. And that's why people have to realize this is still going on. And one of the reasons Israel wants to be at the border there. And if the United States wants to put pressure on something, part of that pressure should be on the Egyptian government and the international community. They want to cease fire. They should put pressure on Egypt precisely for this reason, to make it impossible for Hamas to keep getting its supplies of weapons. So that's an important diplomatic aspect of that question.
Thank you, Danny. Let's do one more question. There are also reports in the news that Israel knows where Sinwar is, but is unable to get to him because he is surrounded by hostages. General, are you able to comment on that piece in the news?
Yes, I think that overall the assessment is that Sinwar is in Khan Yunis and is indeed surrounded by hostages. This doesn't mean we are not going to get to him. We are going to get to him. We'll have to deal with the issue of the hostages. And then there might be a reality where he says, okay, I want that I will be able to give you. Maybe we'll try to fight. We'll see. We'll see what happens. It's going to be complicated. It's not clear.
Thank you. Final question for the day, and thank you to all of our viewers for tuning in. Final question is, General, you mentioned that we have a big conference coming up. We've been doing these briefings online for a good number of months now. If any of our US or Canadian or UK worldwide followers want to come to Israel and attend that conference, is that an option, or it's only for military personnel here in Israel?
No, we just need to be notified and organize it. Anybody who wants to come to Israel, especially for the conference, are invited.
Amazing. You heard that straight from the General. If anyone is interested in attending this conference in Israel, it's in Hebrew, but we will, of course, have live translation with headsets. If anyone is interested in joining, please shoot me an email. We can discuss details.
We'll have all the leadership of the organization. We'll have many of the brigade and battalion commanders. We'll have the leading politicians and diplomats. It's going to be a very, very impressive event, and it's going to be live on Ynet. And of course, there will be a lot of media.
Fantastic. Brigadier General Amir Avivi.
So on the 25th of January.
Yeah, we're going to get the info out. Don't worry, everyone writing in the chat, we'll get the info out. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Stay safe, stay strong, take care. We'll see you again tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time.